So I'm a revenue and strategy guy, but I always anchor on people skills because all business is personal, right? So I'm here between phone calls, I'm hanging out with horses, but during the day, man, we're doing some serious work. And I was speaking with Alex earlier this week, helping companies make very serious decisions when it comes to supply chain because the dynamics have absolutely changed. Your profit margins, how you allocate every line item and putting a product together and getting it to market, and those costs, what do you charge? What's your pricing strategy? Can be significantly impacted by the decisions you make on calls like this on supply chain, talking to Jan on packaging. And there's so many other people along the way. What you thought you knew from 10 years ago, if you've been in the business a long time, are not true today. And for people that are coming on who've got launching a new product, I care about, my main offering is a chief revenue officer as a service. I'm a consultant. I anchor on people first, but then the strategy in business is it has to be anchored in revenue and profitability. And I am so I've been I stumbled up. I couldn't spell supply chain a few years ago, but my clients, I've somehow one leads to the other and through referrals. I've been doing a lot of work, helping companies like GoPro and Arista Networks and people like that. And now working with Extron, helping him redefine how we go to market. And what I realize is we've got to educate the world on how to deal with supply chain and deal with these changes. And they started a few years ago. But that's who I am. Supply chain is my focus, but I'm anchored in the very simple idea that I help people find their joy. I can bring down my entire life activity to that one statement. I think Simon Sinek was selling this whole idea of why. My why is I want you to be in your joy. And I start with myself.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good. I enjoyed that piece of information. It was not planned.
Are you able to share your screen, or do you need me to?
Oh, I could.
Yeah.
I was just reading the joke from Dave on why did the Guru Maharishi refuse Novocaine. I'm sorry. That was good.
Well, now you have to tell those on the call. What's the punchline?
Hang on. Okay, you can see my screen. All right.
You wanted to transcend dental medication. That was the punchline.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to get
I know.
this.
We all groan in our own way. Please continue.
I'm a fan of the bad jokes. I mean, the knock-knock jokes are my favorite. I can go on and on. But anyway, so listen, guys, we're talking about supply chain. I'm going to do this very casually. I'm going to talk through it. I'm going to talk about the old versus new. I'm going to talk about a solution right off the bat, right? And you can do it yourself or you can do it with us, but there's a fundamental idea about how to look. There's a difference on how you should be looking or could be looking at supply chain, just so that you can manage the risks associated in the space, right? And then if you're looking for a partner, because there's absolutely no point going through all the overhead to do it yourself initially, if you're launching a product, what to look for, right? Things like that. But please feel free to ask me questions. So the old model has obviously various iterations, and we started offshoring, but the most common model everybody talks about started about 2010, where almost the entire supply chain, people just went to China, got the product made, and then brought it back in, simply because they did invest in the supply chain, in the market, in being able to get all the components, all the raw materials. They mastered that. Everything had to come out of China. They wouldn't let you bring anything into China. They did not allow you to bring in the best, hypothetically chip, if you would, from Malaysia into China. They might have brought it in, but they control what came out to you. And you had the cost of shipping, you had the cost of sending your employees and your team leads and stuff like that into China. You had to suffer with the time lag. The risks were geopolitical. You had costs. You had all. The worst thing was IP security, right? That has changed. That model doesn't work anymore. The simple fact, I've been talking to some folks. We're dealing with right now $20,000 or more for a container to come across from China when it was $2,000 and $3,000. Now, if that's the case, if your one line item on your cost has gone up 10 points, what does that do to your profit margin, as an example, right? Now's the time to think about all that. So that model is broken, and with the tariffs, things that started politically, you've got to look at situation differently. How do I move this thing over? All right. Sorry. So I'm sorry, I got a bit of a lag here.
No, we're good.
Okay, good. Sorry. So the reason you want to look at a different model, you can call it resilient, you can call it a new model for today's world, is really you want to really focus on efficiencies, managing costs, because your line items have shifted. The percentage points and what things cost you, the prices of manufacturing in China have gone up, shipping's gone up, risks are there. But you've got all kinds of flexibilities, you've got scalability issues, you've got responsiveness issues, you've got resilience in overall being able to say, will my supply chain sustain these challenges? If you go and you listen to sort of the street cred or street culture, you got urban people doing prepping. Why? You go to your stores, supply, you've got products taking so long. I was at Home Depot trying to buy an appliance the other day, and it said there's a 6-week, 7-week if hold delay if we can get it. You look at the harbors in LA. There was an article, I just did a post on LinkedIn. Ships are out 10, 15, 20 days, 40, 50 ships, 30 miles, 40 miles long, waiting to get into the harbor. And once they're in the harbor, because of the COVID regs, the delay it takes, same thing at airports. So it's going to be difficult figuring out where to get your components from, finish your product. But if you're making promises to the market, how do you systems and practices to mitigate these risks? Which is why we're suggesting you do this a little differently, right? Don't follow the same models of going to China, getting the product done there or some other place, or even onshore, working with just one contract manufacturer that's going to say, give us the bombs, give us the schematics, tell us what to do. We'll complete the product, and we'll give you the finished good, and you stay hands off. That is just way too risky, because you don't know what they're dealing with, and you have no control over the supply chain. You're limited to their resources and the companies they do business with to finish up your goods. The risks are significant, so it's time to change the approach. The approach we say is, we coined a term, last mile manufacturing, right? It's basically product assembly here in the US. Control your supply chain, get involved, it's your business, right? Control what comes in, scour the world to find the best product. Ironically, it's on the web and through relationships. I was actually calling on people. I was calling on Mexico to check on, injection molding and things like that yesterday. And the folks in Mexico were like, Paulie, if you are not dealing with big numbers, we won't even want to talk to you, because they have the challenges as well, right? The whole world is impacted by these dynamics.
Oh, let me ask you,
You
and I
want
know
to
you're
be
going to
able
address this. Pardon me. I know you're going to address this slide, and you like conversation. When I see last mile manufacturing,
Yeah.
I think of getting my IKEA furniture 90% assembled, and you're going to do the last 10%. Is that what you mean? That's what it conjures.
That's a great analogy. So we remove the headache from IKEA furniture, we'll assemble it for you. Exactly. That's the point, that you take
Are
the
you
leadership,
assembling the whole
bring the
thing,
product
or are
in.
you assembling the last 10%, the last mile? What does that mean
No.
for you?
No, just the last bit. We can get the components in, right? You can get sub-assemblies in if you design the product right. And then we'll open the boxes and we'll put the product together and then refinish it for you, put it in a nice new box, and then send it out to your customer.
Now, why is that
Right?
an advantage? Because theoretically, if we're doing things overseas, perhaps the materials are there and that's why it's being shipped over. But if it's for cheaper labor, why am I paying for higher labor in the US to have you do the last 10%?
Great question. It's not just labor, right? It is one, you can control where the product is coming from and can you get the right supplier. Right now, supply is huge, it's a huge problem. So controlling and being able to find the best product from the best country or the best supplier. You might find most of it in the US, but you might need 3 pieces from Mexico, 2 from Thailand, and 1 from China as an example. This model gives you the flexibility, several benefits, the flexibility to find the right product from the right country, bring it in. But I want to make one very good comment on your fantastic example. If you are assembling a table, the volume space of bringing the components in, the legs and all that stuff on the table, are much smaller
Right.
compared to shipping out the made table. And
Yeah.
in any product, that is the case.
Hmm,
Even
that's
if it's,
very interesting.
right? Even if it's a box like this, there's a lot of empty space. And when
Mhm,
shipping costs
that's really
are
interesting.
10 times what they were, 8
Mhm,
times, 7 times what they were, it makes it
mm.
changes the dynamic. It totally
It
changes the
almost sounds
dynamic.
as though that's, I
Now,
mean, I know that Sandeep was in this well before a terrific disruption like this. Um,
yeah.
but it almost sounds like the genesis of someone entering the space simply because of the concept of this versus, the table coming in and shit. I used to, way long ago, 30 plus years ago, I used to be in Kraft Foods on Kool-Aid.
Mm,
I mean, what is that? You could add water yourself, but it costs a
sure,
lot more
sure.
for it to be ready to drink than powdered. So that analogy I get completely. It almost sounds
Right.
like new competition could spring up on that concept alone if shipping rates continue to be as, I mean, I don't know what you think post-COVID looks like, and what do you think the impact will be on shipping rates in 5 years? What percent is it going to decline again?
Yeah, Sandeep may be better equipped to answer that question, but from my perspective, before we go there, is I think this is the new normal for the foreseeable future. It
Speaking of
will
Sandeep,
rectify a little bit, but it will not go back to the old rates. Absolutely
speaking of
not.
whom, he just joined us, so maybe we can get him on. And Jan made a point, so I'll bring her on as well.
Okay.
Hey, Sandeep.
Hey there, how are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Great. I was expecting to kind of listen in more, but since you brought up my name, I figured, okay, I'll happily come in with a couple of comments over here. The reason we got into this was largely because I think Paul brought up just a great point earlier. We saw a huge need for customers wanting to source from across the globe and not force themselves into sourcing from China.
Mhm.
With a forced sourcing from China, you make yourselves then completely susceptible to exchange rates, labor market dynamics, governmental policy, both on this side and on that side, of the Pacific, specifically Chinese government policy and US government policy towards China, and just a whole host of other country-specific regions. The beauty of last mile manufacturing, though it does require, as Paul pointed out, the OEM to be fairly involved in their supply chain. But the beauty of last mile manufacturing is you can source your key components. In other words, the printed circuit board, the plastic, the interconnects, the memory, from anywhere you want in the world. And you're bringing in sub-assemblies to your last mile assembly point. And only there and then do the products get put together exactly the way the customers want them. So the IKEA analogy is not terrific for two reasons.
It's the best I could do, man. This isn't what
yeah,
I do.
yeah. That's fine.
And by the way, the angle of, I think you're maybe holding your phone. It's kind of, we're looking like kind of weird. I don't know if you can stabilize it a bit.
Okay, yeah. So I'm unfortunately just got out of a vehicle, and I'm gonna need to dull my video a little bit as I kind of get into my my next thing. I was expecting to just listen in. I did not realize you had me set
You
up.
can't let this kind of knowledge just sit idly on the side. You understand? I got a show to run here.
You're very kind. But the reason why the IKEA
Example was
why the IKEA
suboptimal.
example doesn't quite work is everything doesn't come over in one knockdown flat kit.
Mhm.
You're sourcing things from all over the world. You're sourcing things from all over the world in different places, and when you're sourcing them from all over the world, the reason you do that is because you want to put your product together where your market is, but you don't necessarily want to source from one country or one location. So that's one reason. That's reason why the IKEA example doesn't work. The second reason IKEA example doesn't work is when we're talking about IKEA, you're generally talking about fairly inexpensive product. We're generally talking about technology a product where there's reasons to actually put it together with parts from multiple geographies. And our products generally have very high expansion factors, unlike like the IKEA product example, but depreciate incredibly fast.
Expansion factor,
Product,
pardon me, for my knowledge, do you mean that it makes it physically bigger? Is that what you mean?
yes,
Expansion
yes.
factor,
The
okay.
expansion factor is something where the components come in
When you
one way
assemble it,
and you assemble it and they become much bigger.
yes.
The other key factor is when you talk about semiconductors, is semiconductors are not able to you're not able to source them necessarily as easily. They're going to come across from multiple geographies, and so so with semiconductors, you're going to get them from different parts of the world, and only then, once you've got your final components, are you going to be able to put them together to exactly your customer order. With the IKEA furniture, you know exactly what you're getting. You're getting a one fungible. It's just a transportation optimization play.
Mm-hmm.
However, with technology products, it's not at all about technology optimization at all. It's not just about transportation optimization. It is about optimizing the entire supply chain, geopolitics, and so many other things.
You said that it's in our best interest to do to complete the manufacturing in your marketplace. And he disappeared. Maybe he'll come back. And I was going to ask, well, here he is again. I was going to ask, why did you, what is, help me understand strategically. I mean, it makes intuitive sense, but I'd like to hear your explanation. Why does it make sense for me to complete my manufacturing close to my market?
When you do it close to your market, you will balance demand and supply. That's the obvious thing. You will optimize transportation costs because you're transporting very likely broken down goods to the final point,
Right.
and shipping and optimizing transportation costs. That is a point. But imagine a situation where you're wanting to source from global suppliers. If you do your final manufacturing in China, as an example, you're now forcing that antenna to go from Taiwan to China. You're forcing sheet metal to go from India to China. You're forcing semiconductors to go from Korea to China. You're forcing the entire thing into a rather Parisian or French system where everything has to go to Paris.
Well, you could say the same thing about shipping everything to California. So
not at all, not at all. Your market is going to be close to California, and your parts can, lots of them. Let me just take this to another example. Your plastics can get sourced in Mexico. You may find your lowest cost landed plastic cost is going to be in Mexico. So you won't have to ship them to China. So that's just a minor piece of it. The most significant is the alignment of supply and demand and the ability to flex your supply chain at the very last mile and not be susceptible to the vagaries, geopolitics, and all the constraints of one geography, i.e. China. China has become a four-letter word in supply chains.
well, it's
our view. Yeah, yes, very clever. And many companies.
If I could jump in though, Sandeep,
yes,
Sandeep, if I could jump in, but this all balances out only when you've got the demand, right? And Sandeep, to this, has actually invested in a company. We have a partner, an own facility in Europe, because a huge part of our customers' markets are in Europe. And so what we're saying, deal with us and we'll duplicate what we can do in the Silicon Valley, because you have a huge market in California and the US. You have a huge market in Europe. So guess what? We'll go there and we can do the same thing for you over there as well. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that, the supply, the demand, then you've got to manage your costs and then ship.
How many different places do you have locations?
So at this point, we maintain our own locations on the West Coast US, East Coast US coming up, Europe, and then through different partners in Sydney, Australia, in Hong Kong, and Japan. Let me, however, just focus the discussion away from Extron, right? Because this is actually not only about Extron. This is about a different style of manufacturing that that emphasizes flexibility, transportation management, inventory reduction of the expensive parts, the expensive depreciable parts. Many years ago, I think this is a study that I would attribute to McKinsey, if I'm not mistaken. There was a study done of technology supply chain costs. And for some parts in the technology supply chain, semiconductors and others, the depreciation factor of the inventory was actually, in some cases, between 1% to 10% per month. It was not just about carrying cost. It was actually about carrying cost. It was about depreciation of the inventory, new technologies obsoleting the old. And so companies that carried a lot of stock, and we can go back to Cisco's infamous write-off of $2 billion of inventory during the not the financial crisis, the crisis before then. The more inventory you stock at your peril. So the last mile manufacturing model is very inventory sensitive and very inventory optimizing, in addition to freight cost managing. And then the other big one we haven't talked about is, of course, managing IP. If you're wanting to get your product done in an IP sensitive environment, you want to do it in Europe or you want to do it in the US, especially where your product has a lot of IP involved. So
a quick, I just want to, Jan, I brought you on because you left a comment back when we were talking about optimizing transportation costs. Did you want to add to that at all?
Well, there's two things that are going on here in my mind when I see this, because I've been working on trying to get pharmaceutical and medical device people that don't have electronics to do what I call manufacturing to demand, because they make all sorts of inventory to go to one country and then it's got to be shipped to another country. So you got to strip all the labeling out and change some of the packaging in order to send it out there. So why put it all together in the first place until you get an order? It took Stryker in one of their divisions 4 years before they could get that qualified and set up and going. I work on a smaller basis than what you're talking about. And Joe, if I can share my screen, this is, let me share this one. This is a screen where we were trying to look at the logistics of a pharmaceutical product that was being made in 4 different countries and sterilized and then shipped to a final place where they put all the different pieces together at different temperatures and then shipped to the US for holding. It was a nightmare just trying to come up with this packaging and make sure that we had all the bulk stuff working properly. But it sure helped a lot with the costs by being able to map it out and see what we were doing and how you needed to do this. And what he's talking about with the electronic parts is it is even more of a nightmare, but I could see where it would help a lot. But you've got to have the right packaging where you've made sure you've optimized the size for the shipping costs and get it to you for whatever you're going to do with it and put it together and make sure it all works right. And that's part of what a packaging engineer does, is try to optimize sizing for shipping.
No, exactly. I'll give you some really some practical things that I've personally been involved with. We talked about Susan. Yes, thanks, Jan. But to Jan's point, Stephen Gold, somebody mentioned Stephen Gold, right? I was involved with a deal some time ago where Stephen Gold was doing the packaging and could not match the colors for this product in China. They were trying to print them in Mexico, but they couldn't match it. So the company was left with bringing the packaging from Mexico, from China, getting printed, making sure the quality was the same, and then getting it assembled in Mexico. In the Silicon Valley, we've been involved with bringing product in, and then when for the we managed Mins and Maxes, for the product going to French-speaking Canada, we'd flip to the Chinese packaging and the Chinese instructions. I mean, the French instructions. Product came from China, but for Quebec, we would do French. Right, those orders. For Mexico and Latin America, we do Spanish with the same product inside. So being close to your market and being able to then provide the right product to the customer at the lowest cost and be nimble is what this new model is all about. If you went to a big box contraband manufacturer, they'd say, build all the components for Latin America at one time, build all the components for China at one time, big boxes, a lot of empty space, a lot of air, you're shipping the product around, and it's cash flow.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
cash flow,
Well,
right?
the
You're not
cost,
managing
the
it
cost
properly.
just for the warehouse space that you're going to hold all this
Yeah.
stuff can really kill you
Right.
off too.
I brought Andre on because he's sartorially splendid and because he is a contract manufacturer. And I just wanted to get what are you hearing today and what's resonating with you? And do you have any kind of, since you do all of your manufacturing domestically, are there advantages or disadvantages that you're hearing?
Well, there's no question about it. In fact, unfortunately, I have to disagree with one thing that Sandeep said, and that's really what occurred now during this situation with the shortages, because our inventory, Sandeep, are actually going way up. Because before, instead of just-in-time purchasing, now we do just-in-case purchasing. So
Yeah,
if we see
absolutely.
somebody has 50,000 microprocessors, and we may only need 10,000, we'll buy all 50,000 just in case we need them in the future. And so, and that may actually be contributing more to the shortages. And yes, absolutely, with respect to what Paul is saying, we are sourcing now literally any place in the world that we can find components and parts and bringing them in. And, Joe, what you said is that as a U.S. contract manufacturer, the added advantage we have is that, with that last mile is we're also the last touch point for the FDA. So that's why we call it the last touch, whereby when we're manufacturing things for our customers, we're the last touch at that last mile production that we do here in New Jersey. We do all of the regulatory aspects for the inspections and so forth. So it's a combination now where you're a global acquirer, but then you're a local manufacturer.
I could not have put it better myself. You're a global acquirer. So one of the terms we use is source globally, but manufacture domestically, use globalization intelligently. And to your point about inventory being stocked, we're absolutely seeing more and more inventory here because people are not wanting to take any risks with inventory. In the old days, yes, this was a great way to optimize inventory. However, let me propose one simple difference here, is that if inventory is indeed being sourced in larger quantities all over the world, and which is we know absolutely the case right now, it's the reason why we're seeing record vacancy of U.S. warehouse space below 1%. People acquiring lots more inventory, bringing in the parts, and the key components are what is being flown in. That lends itself so incredibly well to last mile manufacturing, where you bring in your power supplies and your chassis and things like that by ocean, and you're flying in the last guts of or the things that are short, and you fly those in at the last minute. The beauty of that model is you can put the right software, the right configuration, and make it available to your customer. Now, from an inventory perspective, the inventory dollars may actually go down because your semiconductors are the most expensive part of the entire value chain. You may be paying a lot of money to bring in the chassis and the plastics and the power supplies, but those, relatively speaking, are in the 20% bucket, not the expensive part of the product. So where a lot of comments being made here are just beautiful. And I know that, Paul has a slide on how this is graphically changing the supply chain. I don't know if you want to show that, Paul. And again, I'd like to make this conversation more about the entire supply chain restructuring, less about Extron, because this is a movement. We're going to see huge movement onshore of products, and the supply chain may actually be evolving in such a way that cheap parts are going to come in, brought in bulk, and configured domestically. And if we actually do optimized sourcing of and design of the expensive parts of the product, we can actually still have our cake and eat it too. Increase inventory on one side, but actually decrease inventory on the other.
Sandeep, when we talked last week, I proposed that you'd be a great candidate for a fast round at 10X. I withdraw the invitation. I think we need a presentation because there's just too much here to capture in 5 minutes. I brought Kevin on because he's suffering a problem right now. Kevin, you want to tell us what's going on in your neck of the woods? Off mute, sir. Thank you.
Yep. Well, like everybody else, everything's a problem right now.
Can you help him out understand what?
So I mean, a lot of what I'm directly involved in is actually a lot more complicated because it is also drugs. So it's either directly drug or it's combination products. And substituting anything that's been disrupted is a regulatory nightmare, because there you get into having to do chemistry and validation. And, you know, what's become a major problem for the entire industry is that you've got some key products where you've got, you know, global bottlenecks, basically. You know, what's of particular concern right now is, you know, pharma grade solvents. They are in short supply and have become horrendously expensive, and you only have a few people that make it. So to substitute is difficult, but even if you can find a new supplier, you've got essentially, you know, in the best possible case, a 12-month turnaround for validation and get it into formulation, you know, doing your validation work and stability work, and then filing a supplement with FDA. And, you know, I'm not as directly involved on straight devices. I'm kind of curious, actually, for some opinions there, how easy it is to replace things on the device side. But I know for us, you know, I'm involved with some of those combination products. A lot of that is infection prevention devices, and with multiple components. You know, right now polymers, special polymers are problematic as well. And then just, you know, talking, you know, with Andre's point, we've had an issue all year. You know, we utilize third-party warehouses for a lot of the chemicals we do. I can't find anybody that will even take product. The 3PL warehouses, at least for chemicals, are becoming much more selective because they've got so much business. And if you can't commit to them, basically, you know, $100,000 a month worth of billing, it's not worth it. We don't even want to take the product.
Kevin, if I could comment, Kevin, you bring up a very good point, because in the medical device field, you know, and we actually make some combination products, and we've got a great example of an electronic device with a drug, so it's a combination product. On the device side, if there's a change that has to be made based upon a component and so forth, so long as the accuracy, safety, and so forth hasn't changed, in essence, we can do a letter to file with respect to a flow chart that's approved by the FDA for a device change, so we don't have to go in for regulatory approval. Yeah. On the other side, anything related to the drug is a monster problem because of just what you said, all of the testing and so forth. So in the combination field, if it's just a device change, or even without a combination, yeah, it's really not a problem. But certainly what you said is absolutely amplified.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of interested to see what the regulators do, you know, in light of all of the massive problems that we have right now. I think there's going to have to be some kind of effort to make the pathway a little bit easier, and which is counter to what the direction that they had been going for the last 10 years, where, quite frankly, they seem to be going out of their way to make everything more difficult. You know, if you look at something as basic and as commonly used in the industry as IPA, sure, you know, isopropyl alcohol, where in the past it was kind of accepted on the basis of, you know, just monograph quality. All of a sudden, 10 years ago, the FDA decided that the safety of IPA was unknown, and they wanted all kinds of studies done on the safety and toxicity of IPA. And what the big change for the business was, they basically started asking for submission of drug master files for IPA.
Crazy.
And the big producers all, you know, said, you know, we're not doing that. You know, somebody like Exxon, they're not in the business of doing APIs, and they certainly don't want to have to classify their facility as a drug manufacturing facility that then opens up them to inspections and facility filing fees. And, you know, that complicates things for a lot of people, because, you know, you don't have something like, you know, like a DMF available. And all of a sudden, if you want to put it into a product, you've got to do all that regulatory work yourself and put the quality work of the IPA, you know, that's then on the burden of the finished device manufacturer instead of, you know, the IPA suppliers and API manufacturer.
Thank you, Kevin. As your host, I'm going to redirect a little bit, yep, just to let you know that.
No. But my point is that, you know, with what's going on, it's kind of across everything, and I think it is something that, as an industry, the industry kind of needs to push back a little bit on the regulators to say, you know, we're looking at the shift, and I don't know if Sandeep and Paul kind of agree. You know, I think this is really going to be kind of the main focus of work for this entire industry for the next 10 years, to turn around their entire supply chains. And I don't know what that means at the FDA end for them being able to handle what's going to be inbound to the agency on changes.
Administratively, Dwight wrote you, and I sent it to you on MDG Premium, so you can follow up with him. And in the chat, I sent a link to Kevin's presentation back in episode 65, if you're so inclined. I'm gonna
Thanks, Joe.
kick you guys off. And Paul, I remember maybe about a half hour ago, you were making a presentation. So I'm gonna, I know we all agree, and that's what we enjoy most about these calls, is we get to have a conversation. But at some point, I'm gonna do my hostly duty here and give you a chance to say what you were gonna say, or some of it anyhow.
Yeah, no, and this is exactly where the way I was wanting to do this. So let me
You got your wish.
share, actually, I think the next slide
I
is,
took yours. You'll need to ask for slide share again, because I took it off so we could all see.
oh, you did, okay.
People talking, yeah. Go ahead.
Hang on
Head
a
back.
sec. In the show. All right. Let's go back, because that's the slide I wanted to share with you.
The new
All right.
last mile supply chain.
So this slide, but let me act, so putting it in slide share mode. All right. So this sort of
I'm
gives
putting
you
your deck in.
graphical,
I'm putting your deck in the Our Weekly Call section of Premium for folks, if we don't get to everything.
Got it.
Please continue.
yeah. No worries. So this slide moves a little bit to make the point we've been talking about, right? So in the old model, you get all your suppliers on the left, sending their product to your contract manufacturer. They do the final assembly, usually overseas. And then we move these containers, which were 10 times cheaper in those days, freight cost, bring it to a facility in the US, a distribution center, and then you might, and then ship it out to your customer, and you might have added services, special services, engineering, warranty, returns management, things like that. Now, the new approach starts moving in the direction of saying, hey, let's break down how this works and do the final assembly in the US, get the suppliers to send you product, find the right suppliers, bring a little more flexibility into the supply chain because you've got challenges. Do you need to get 3x of a certain product because it's available? Just in case, by the way, I'm going to absolutely seal it, Andre. All right, the just in case you buy those components, you ship product in via ocean, some because it's cheap and effective, and you got time and it's a core product. But the special products you fly in, you allow that flexibility and do the final assembly in a controlled environment, closer to your client. You can be nimble, you can be quick, you can save time moving, shipping the product the last mile to your client, right? That's the new model that we are suggesting. And then for the right clients, you can go, and it's a service we offer, where what we do is we step in and actually start helping you bring components in because we've got relationships, right? And that's something you can look for in your partner as well, because you might need help. That's definitely an advantage with contract manufacturers that might have their own facility, but you want to be able to acquire components when you need them and make sure you can look at the entire supply chain and figure out how much stock do we have? How do you manage your supply chain? How do you manage the forecast to the products you have? And that level of flexibility in today's market being so challenging, that this model is what we believe a safer way to go, to make sure your supply chain is resilient and not going to fumble because one piece is missing. The packaging is not coming. This, the that. We have control. Maybe you don't need to do the full production run like you did before with the contract manufacturer. You do a smaller production run because you are in control, right? That's the difference, and that's the value. Sandeep, anything else you want to add to the slide? Any comments? Or does anybody else have any questions?
Please continue.
I think he's putting.
No,
Okay.
I
didn't see.
would just make the point that on the right-hand slide, you've got these advantages, and each one of those is honestly a webinar in its own right. But the key point is at the top, that if you have more control points and levers, you can manipulate your supply chain to manage your IP risk, manage your transportation costs, manage your risk of concentration to a supplier a geography, a country, a geopolitical conflict. You can reduce inventories, the wonderful comments of Andre notwithstanding, that you're going to be buying more inventory, but you can buy the right inventory. For example, right now, we've got a customer who has bought tremendous amounts of inventory stocked in warehouses worth of parts, because as soon as China shut down, parts became short supply, and they didn't want to run into this issue again. In the meantime, they're busy globalizing. Parts now are being sourced from Taiwan, parts are being sourced from India, and they bought in inventory as soon as they could. However, they can't ship all their product because some key semiconductors are short. So we're bringing in broken down product. Key circuit boards are built offshore, flown in, and you can get hundreds of them in a little box, and they're being put together and assembled. So the amount of inventory is actually increased, but the flexibility is dramatically increased. And that comes to the final point.
Awesome. Thank you. So just expanding on the benefits of this approach, right, that Sandeep was talking about. I think if we could keep beating this horse up, not that I want to do that with my horses, but I think you get the point. We literally as a company are anchoring the value of what we bring to our clients in this seems to be new approach, but it will be business as usual. We're all experiencing variations of it. But I think at this point, let's just stop over here because the rest of it is really more about who we are and how we help with the value. The rest of the value add on the slide deck is really about the other things we do with our logistics business, if you would. But we want to help you focus on being able to protect the manufacturing of your product because the components are tough. Deal with last mile manufacturing, which is product assembly in your market, in this case, the US. So you can focus on scalability. You can focus on configuration as your clients need them, your end customer needs them. It's about customer experience. I mean, even Jan's work, even packaging is about customer experience. Can you manage returns? Do you need that? It's when you look at the resilient supply chain, it's not just about the manufacturing, right? It's about customer experience. It's about managing your product, moving the boxes all effectively in a way that drops cost, allows you to perform, allows you to manage your brand in the market, right? Returns management is huge, right? And constantly managing costs with even outbound freight that is from the warehouse to the customer, if you would. I have to, when we're talking about resilient supply chains, I can't emphasize enough on IT. You've got to have the right IT, enterprise grade IT solutions, the API framework, the ability for your system to talk to each other. And are they talking to each other? Are you getting the right data inputs from all the different vendors that you're dealing with so that you can exactly see where your product is at any given time, and you can do the forecasting to make sure you've got the right product at the right location at the right time to take care of your customer.
And that's not one of your core competencies. You recommend third-party suppliers, vendors.
Yeah, we're not
models
exactly. We're building our own IT system. It's on its third variation since the beginning, I believe. But we're always on. It's a huge.
But there are some companies steeped in just that. What are some of the big names that we might recognize in that software?
I missed the question again.
Who are the software leaders in our logistics space? Because I was talking about the value of IT and the ability for systems to talk to each other. And I think the answer really is it's multiple vendors based on your product and your category. But it's also IT staff that will help you do the integrations because there is no one main leader. But is there, question to you, Sandeep, is there a one main leader, or how do you specify who do you go to? Joe's asking for referrals.
Yeah, so the result is actually we've actually built our own software. There was no clear solution. Clearly, there's a bottom layer of IT, which is the ERP system, the transportation management systems, the warehouse management systems, shop floor management. Those can all be purchased, and there's integrated solutions all across the board. It's the solution above that we've actually had to build. We've got software that we use called, we've developed it, we've called our own, but we've actually created modules for handling demos, for handling returns, for handling what we call last mile configuration activities. There's no clean solution available right now that allows for this high volume. We've actually had to build that. I think solutions will emerge over time, but there's no clear solution right now.
Yeah, and to Joe, to that point, I personally literally have been involved very closely with 4 or 5 systems. Worked with a large company in Guadalajara, a logistics company, a few years ago, 3PL, just like us, and they built their own system. We've been talking to companies in Toronto, in Toledo, in Louisville, in Columbus, Ohio, as we are expanding here. And my gosh, it's the same thing. They talk about, we have 3 guys, we have 3 people on staff and another 2 people offshore. Building IT infrastructure and capability is a significant part. In fact, I think you could say, Sandeep and I were joking that we're an IT company, camouflaged as a logistics company, because it's such an integral part of what we're doing.
What having looked at your presentation, I'm going to ask you, just for the benefit of the folks who, we're already up at an hour, just show us the other slides, and if you can, give 1 sentence about what they should take away should they invest more time in this topic. What did you mean to communicate with this slide?
Yeah, so I'd say I'd focus on this, which is look at the robust, look at the supply chain as not just getting a product in, right? It is manufacturing the product, managing inventory, getting the product in, making sure you have the right technology to manage the flow of goods.
And do you mean to communicate with this slide that each of these bullet points is a functional strength for you guys?
For us, and should be a core competency of any supply chain, especially when somebody's thinking about managing resilience and the ability for their supply chain to deliver in today's market.
Thank you. Next slide.
Well, again, the resilience is about managing risk. So you want to be responsive, because again, I'm very sensitive with customer expectation has gone up tremendously, right? Amazon has changed that. The customers want to know where the product is, when it's coming over. They want to be very, very involved. They're very demanding. So you've got to manage that as well. You've got to get end-to-end. You've got to get the product into the US to the customer and back. So that's why the end-to-end solution, you have to manage your inventory. Everything is technology-based. Again, we're repeating ourselves, but the ability to address these core competencies of managing customer expectation, getting the product in, getting the right product, warehousing, IT, those are going to be your fundamental steps, and you stay in the driver's seat.
You don't have to address every slide, just if there's a top line, because I know that these next couple of slides support the point. It's basically you're talking about why last mile is better than third-party logistics. Yes?
The last mile manufacturing, in our case, is part of the third-party logistics, right? It is the value add we bring to the table is that we wrap these two. We take over. It's like passing on the baton. We get involved in the last mile manufacturing, product assembly, could help you control the cost and resilience, and then we warehouse and we do the distribution, and we help you with the last mile delivery and returns management so that your customer can have a positive experience. A lot of 3PLs don't do the manufacturing piece. A lot of the manufacturers don't do the logistics piece. We actually control, we help you do more under one roof. And that's the value add.
Thank you.
This is a very interesting, unique offering we have for certain products that are typically higher in value, a little costlier, where a customer has an expectation they can try before they buy. If that appeals, if that is a scenario, we have a very good system that allows us to configure a product for a specific prospect receive a notification from your sales team, and that also is IT integration. We're integrated we know how to integrate to CRM systems, where a salesperson, a distributor can say, we need this product sent to this person.
I had to Google RMA. It means Return Merchandise Authorization. Perhaps the folks on the call knew that. I did not.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
So this is a process for taking returns in.
But more importantly, the demo is key, because that involves a lot of hand holding. You got to configure a product, send it to a customer. They got to try it out. We've built in automations and processes to then follow up with the customer. Imagine you got 50 salespeople, each one of them has 3 or 4 demo units out, and 6 of them leave for some reason. You've got a whole bunch of inventory out with customer and nobody's following up. It is a logical nightmare, logistics nightmare. So we actually have a very well-structured program to deal with this.
Okay.
If this is a situation and a need in today's world, because salespeople don't want to go on a sales call, customers don't want to have people coming in the office, but product still needs to move. This is a fantastic solution. We've done it very successfully for a few of our clients.
A webinar unto itself. Next slide.
That's what, yeah, exactly. Sandeep was talking about the advantages.
I know.
One of those.
Well, you can be our guest for the rest of the year, I guess. It would save me a lot of time finding speakers. So that's 2 birds with 1 stone. Excellent.
So Joe, let me just put it this way, right? Supply chains have evolved since the 80s and 90s. What we're now seeing is many ways in which companies are having to optimize. And what we've done is realize that there's some things that have to be globalized, but there's some things that absolutely need to be domestic. And this is sort of the next generation in that learning, that understanding that returns management, RMAs, demos, final configuration, some aspects of obviously fulfillment and distribution, all those activities have to be conducted. How do you do those close to the customer to optimize the supply chain? In the 90s and 2000s, everybody moved offshore, but we have found that there's certain limitations to the 100% offshore model. Early on, there was a slide showing the change in cost, whether you're onshore and offshore. This is just us optimizing the supply chain to the next degree. This time around, it's been complicated by COVID and by geopolitics, but this is the natural progression of business. You start doing something, and then you figure out a better way to do it, and then you figure out a better way to do it. And this is us now responding to stimulus to change the structure of supply chains, to make them less Asia-centric, to make them less globalized. I'm not surprised that this will happen, and it'll continue to happen in not only this industry, but across industries, that there's going to be improvement and changes. Specifically on the supply chain, there's a lot of things it did not make sense to put offshore. And I think last mile manufacturing is now a response to that. We've seen this happen already in the auto industry. Auto industry did bring back a lot of final assembly and configuration. In that respect, automobiles are actually a little ahead of the US technology industry, paradoxically.
I'll overshare for the folks on the call. Paul and Sandeep and I talked last week about potentially having me help with their messaging, with their marketing. And I'll tell you that my head is spinning. You've said, early in the call, you told me about, optimizing shipping and the poor IKEA example. And I was like, oh, I got it. That makes so much sense. You can ship that way and that'll save so much money. I was like, oh, I got this. And that was like just scratching the surface of how many tentacles there are on this thing. I'm sure we can come up with a sentence that is your value proposition, as I know you have. It's not in my head yet, but there are so many stories to tell here that it's almost, you have so many angles of this that I think most people in our space don't fully appreciate. So I think we have a sizable amount of potentially work to do together on this.
Good.
Paul, you had one more slide before we.
Again, IT, right? When you break up your supply chain from just having one contract manufacturer sending you product and you are involved, in sourcing product out and taking control in quotes of your destiny here. Making sure you've got the right IT configuration is important to keep track of product both coming in and going out to your customer. But ultimately, it's all about customer experience and expectation. And so make sure you've got that in place. And then, my gosh, forecasting and planning in today's world is really challenging because you have to manage costs. Putting that off to a third party is dangerous because you're limited to their world view, if you would. So making sure you can link forecasting, get really accurate with your go-to-market team, understand what you need, what product you need, where and when, really down to a different level of a unit. Whatever you thought was acceptable before, you might have to get it to smaller units and then make sure your supply chain is linked to that. So in IT world, customization, configuration, EDI interface service, but that's very important to your supply chain. Well, I think that's enough for us. This is just more specific about who we are. We've been around. We moved about $2 billion worth of product. In 30 years.
I'm going to stop you
we
on
are
this.
IKEA certified.
This slide
The last
says,
comment is,
this slide says, everything you've heard in the last hour, these guys know what they're talking about, and they've been doing it a long time. Have I captured it? If you have a question about supply chain, anything, give Paul a call.
With the fact that we are FDA certified as a contract manufacturer.
Okay.
Right. So we can get your products. We follow those guidelines, and as well as ISO certified. So that's basically it. We are go-to guys if you've got issues related to supply chain.